correct.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
That's correct.
Big problems become big problems. You let small problems sit.
All right, we're ready. How's it going, everybody?
Just reading about the threat Bernie Sanders poses to centrists, the Democratic Party.
Ah, boy. That came out of nowhere, huh? I think they would have been saying that for like, I don't know, since like 2016. This
We're
came out
so
of nowhere.
scared. We're so scared.
Whoa.
Bernie, no. Oh, no.
Was that an impression of anyone in particular?
That's just the entire centrist wing of the Democratic Party. We're afraid of Bernie.
Live stream chat. What's happening? Let's see here. We got, okay, the knocking on the table.
Oh, sorry, man.
Knock that off, please.
Hey, whoa, good pun.
Oh, that was good. All right, I think we're good to go here. I think they heard the dramatic music that we were playing, so we're going to go ahead and get the show started. Yes, guys, I have my laptop today. So we'll have the regular song, and boy, that won't happen again. Slap my wrist. The Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, February 13th is just moments away. The Ben Joravsky Show featuring Dennis's laptop.
I love that laptop.
It's brought to you by the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 in District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9 are sponsors of this program. Just give me a second here. As well as the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Ben Joravsky on this snowy day. Let's hear that song of the day.
You know, I heard this song last night while I was washing the dishes, okay? You make me feel like a natural woman. Yes, you do. Dee, 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 dee.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
That's my, that's the Carole King version of it. You want me to do the Aretha Franklin version?
Ben Joravsky Show starts now. No.
Okay.
It is Thursday, February 13th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, we're talking progressive politics and Bernie with In These Times writer Miles Kampf-Lassin. And our Cannabis Conversation series continues with Lisa Solomon of the Chicago Reader and Sparky Rose. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Scarlet Letter Thursday. And here's why. My Sun-Times headline, said it all. Beloved bright one, home delivered as always. If it's up to City Hall, they'll never work for this town again. Then you open it up to page 12 where the story is. And then, come on, D. I know you're more of a Tribune guy when it comes to headlines, but come on, D, on this headline.
You're not wrong about that.
Hold your hire.
Like fire.
Oh. Now, this is
That's pretty good.
Now, this is a Sun Times exclusive. Shout out to Fran Spielman, who we share this office space, a studio space with. She records her show here as well. Fran Spielman, this is a Sun Times exclusive based on, what did they do? 29-page list of untouchables released to the Chicago Sun-Times in response to a Freedom of Information request. So there's no Tribune counterpart that I can turn to, D, so you could then judge, like, which is better. Now, folks know, have heard this bit, D loves the Tribune headlines. I'm more of a Sun-Times headline guy. Hold your hire. Turns out, in its infinite wisdom, the city of Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, has a do not hire list. That means once fired, once removed from office, you are never, ever, 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 to be hired again.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mueller. Unless, of course, there's some process you can go through to clear your name. I think it's like once every 2 years. But it reminds me sort of like there was a TV show way back in the day, long before Dr. D was born, probably long before any of you were born, called Branded. And in this TV show, Chuck Connors played a former, was a Civil War soldier who was unjustly accused of cowardice, I think it was, D. Don't quote me on this. And they kicked him out of the army. They branded him, and they took his sword and they broke it over their legs. So he could never use his sword again, which is kind of funny. It's like, well, you could just get another sword, you know what I mean? But anyway, they broke the sword. That's the only part of the show I remember. And that's what they're doing in the city of Chicago.
That show sounds awesome.
No, it was actually my memory says it was not a bad show. We're talking about a show that aired somewhere in the mid-'60s. So, folks, memory's a little faulty on my part, so don't rush to watch it. But I'm just saying it had a great opening where they took the sword. And Mad Magazine, I know I'm in a tangent within a tangent. I love Mad Magazine. They did a parody of Branded, but when they broke the sword, they had the wrong end. So when the guy broke the sword over his leg, he cut his leg off. I thought that was hilarious back. Anyway, Mad Magazine. Where was I? Branded for life. Oh, yes. Do not hire list. I've got a lot of issues with do not hire lists in general. Now, I understand if somebody is charged and convicted of a very egregious crime, that he or she should not be, let's say you're a public school employee who has abused children. Yes, you should be on a do not hire list. You should not be put in a position where you can abuse more children. Duh. But a political do not hire list? I don't know. You know, like, it just kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's like the inner civil libertarian in me. You understand what I'm saying? I got that inner civil libertarian in me, the inner ACLU member in me, sort of like the inner Republican that exists within me, D, that is awakened every time I get my property tax bill. Good, damn it, Ronner had a point. No, he didn't, folks. But I'm, just saying. Anyway, back to Branded for Life, Do Not Hire. Fran Spielman with a story, excellent story. I urge everybody to check it out.
Wait.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Did you say Bruce Rauner?
Yes, I did. Thank God you've got your computer back.
Yeah, no kidding.
Could you play the Rauner thing yesterday?
No.
Oh, man, I missed it. Yay for our teachers. Then, of course, the next part is yay for Ann Burke. They always, forget that part. Bruce Rauner's good friends, the Burkes. Anyway, moving on. They've banned for life, they put on the do not hire list, Eddie Johnson, former police chief, and Bill McCaffrey, the young fellow who was the spokesperson in the law department. Now, let me just say this before we get started. I'm not friends with either man, Johnson or McCaffrey. I don't know either man. I'm not sure I've ever met him. I know I've never met Johnson. I'm pretty sure I've never met McCaffrey. So I'm just saying I'm looking at this from afar. So I'm not privy to their version of what went down. They've not told me their version. Neither of them is speaking to the press as to what went down. But let's just break down the facts that we know. Eddie Johnson was the police chief. Mayor Rahm hired him after firing Gary McCarthy. He served, I think. He did a good job. serving as police chief at a very tumultuous time, trying to rebuild bridges that have been badly burned between Chicago's police department and its black community in the aftermath of the Quan McDonald video being released. Thought he did an admirable job. I remember he walked with Father Flagler. Remember the march, D? We talked about that a lot along the Kennedy or the Dan Ryan when they were protesting budget cuts from the state budget cuts. So, you know, I thought he did an admirable job at a very difficult time, and he got caught up in an embarrassing scandal. He was kissing a woman who was not his wife at a bar downtown Chicago, all right? City of Chicago was shocked by that, D, shocked and horrified. We had that headline going for how many days? We talked about Eddie Gate for how many days, D? You know, City of Chicago is still, it's like 1975 here in the city. We're shocked.
Oh, you would love that. You love the 70s.
Wait, 1955. Let's go back in
There you
time.
go.
The 70s was kind of a hip swinging time, man.
Been 30 years old in the 1950s. He's really old, guys.
Back in the 1950s, I was 30 years old and listened to Frank Sinatra records. Anyway, Chicago was shocked by that. And Lori Lightfoot was shocked. She said he lied to her. Who knows? I don't know. Lori Lightfoot said he lied. He was fired. They put him on a do not hire list. I think that's overkill. I do not think that Eddie Johnson should be permanently banned from working for the city of Chicago. We don't even know what went down in the conversation between Eddie Johnson and Lori Lightfoot. I just think it's like humiliating the guy. What did he do that deserves such humiliation? I mean, he gave some solid service to the city of Chicago, and that's the reward he gets? Humiliated? He already had his freaking embarrassing escapade paraded on the front pages of all the paper. Now he's on a do not hire list. Oh, must never hire Eddie Johnson again because he, unforgivable crime of what? Lying to the mayor? We don't know. We don't know what was said between the two of them. Bill McCaffrey. Now, Bill McCaffrey was, he's not nearly as well known as Eddie Johnson. His story was not splashed across the pages. He was a spokesperson for the city law department at the time. And again, I never had any encounters with him when he was a law department spokesperson. Generally don't have the best relations, by the way, D. I just got to share this with the communication specialists for the Emanuel administration and the Daley administration back then. They just didn't want anything to do with me. Can you believe that? Them not wanting something to do with me? I'm such a nice guy,
Take a
right?
chill pill, man.
Yeah. Okay, Ram, I will do that. Anyway, this arose from the incident regarding Corporation Counsel Mark Flessner. That was Flessner-gate. Now, we talked a lot about this. Flessner-gate is the Corporation Counsel, the chief lawyer that the city has. He was hired for that job by Mayor Lori Lightfoot. She should be free to hire who she wants, right, D? The Corporation Counsel is the number one legal advisor that the mayor of Chicago has. As such, she turns to him or her for all kinds of advice on all kinds of issues. So it has to be someone that Lori Lightfoot trusts, someone that Lori Lightfoot admires, someone who Lori Lightfoot thinks has integrity, someone that Lori Lightfoot thinks whose view of law matches her view of law. It's a very important position. And so I agree that Lori Lightfoot should be able to hire whoever she wants. So she did a survey of all the lawyers in the world and decided that Mark Flessner was the lawyer best suited to fill this important job. Fine. That's her prerogative, D. She was elected mayor of the city of Chicago. I voted for her. Okay. Turns out
It's her prerogative. She can do what she wants to do.
Well, in this case, all right. I don't know if she could. In this case, she could do what she wants to do. Turns out
That was a Bobby Brown reference.
Oh, I missed that.
I know. Well, I know you
It
did.
went
It was
like
in
this.
the 80s.
In this case, it turns out that Mark Flessner did not live in the city of Chicago, D. No, lived in Naperville, I think. That's a suburb, okay? Furthermore, here's the part that really got to me. Turns out that he voted Republican in the 2018 primary, which meant that he either voted for Jeannie Ives or Bruce Rauner. That staggers me. It's like, what in the world would motivate somebody? I really struggle with this, folks. I understand that not everybody's a Democrat like I am. But what in the world would motivate somebody to vote in that particular primary? Your choice was Bruce Rauner, who is arguably the worst governor this state has. No, he was the worst governor this state has ever had, at least in my lifetime.
I mean, in the 50s, too?
Yeah, he was. Oh,
I know
my
you were
God.
around for that.
The 50s. We had some great governors in the 50s. Stratton.
Yay
William
for our
Stratton.
teachers! Yay for our teachers!
William Stratton may have served some time in jail. All
Oh.
right. Okay.
There you go.
Forget Stratton.
Sounds
All
like
right.
a typical Illinois governor.
So he's, I would say, now, is he worse than Governor Blagojevich? I got to think about this, okay? Blagojevich, at least. I know Blagojevich is doing time in federal prison, but, you know, at least he got budgets passed, right? He did that. Rauner couldn't do that. So I don't know. We could talk all day. We could have that debate. Is Rauner worse than Blagojevich? But he certainly didn't warrant re-election. So who was Flessner voting for? The opposition was Jeannie Ives. Jeannie Ives is probably to the right of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, if such a thing is possible. She is a vehement opponent to a woman's right to choose, among other things, gay rights, et cetera, and so forth. So I have a hard time believing that Flessner would take a ballot to vote for Jeannie Ives. Either way, it's a terrible, it doesn't show a lot that it doesn't speak well for the person that Lori Lightfoot would decide should be our corporation counsel, someone who voted in the Republican primary in 2018. But that was her decision. Somehow or other, in the fallout of all that, Bill McCaffrey got fired. The spokesperson for the law department got fired. Flessner didn't get fired.
Flessner?
McCaffrey got fired. And now he's on a do not hire list. How is that fair? How is that right? How is that just? How is that? That just smells of just bully-like punishment. I don't know. When I look at it all in all, I'm telling you what. I don't think Mark Flessner should be fired. Excuse me, Flessner. I got his name wrong. I apologize. Mark Flessner. I don't believe Mark Flessner.
He's listening. He was offended so much.
I don't.
How dare he?
I've got a feeling it may get to him. A copy of this may get to him. A transcript of this may get to him. Anyway, I'm not saying that Mark Flessner should be fired for the high crime of being a Republican. But I don't know if he should have been hired in the first place. We got a great show today, everybody. Yes, indeed. Miles Kampf-Lassin will be in the studio talking Bernie, and Bernie. All right? Bernie's under siege. The centrists are losing their minds. My beloved centrists. I love centrists. Many of my best friends are centrists, and they all are losing their minds, and they're all trying to convince me that Bernie Sanders would be utter ruin for the Democratic Party. I don't think a day passes with the centrists not reaching out to tell me that, D. A lot of reefer talk ahead. Lisa Solomon and Sparky Rose. All things reefer. Reefer's been legalized in the state of Illinois. Did you know that, D?
Yep. Yeah.
Just wanted to see if you're paying attention. So plenty of
Sparky Rose. Very cool name for someone who
has
business with cannabis.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I love it when you call it cannabis, by the way. Anyway, so plenty of political talk ahead of us. Plenty of reefer talk ahead of us. Before we do any of that, the young man from Alton, the man they call Dr. Doobie, with the news.
How's it going, everybody? Hey, how about we find out what's happening in Chicago and/or Illinois this afternoon, huh? What do you say about that, Ben?
I said it's a great idea.
I think so, too.
Did you just think of that?
Yeah. First up, no public events scheduled for our Illinois Governor, J.B. Pritzker. Ben Joravsky, it's a very snowy day here in the city of Chicago, and apparently the guy has nothing going on today, so I will pose this hard-hitting question to you. Does J.B. Pritzker, the richest politician in America, besides Michael Bloomberg, old moneybags Bloomberg, does J.B. Pritzker shovel his own driveway and sidewalk?
Well, first of all, again, he's not the richest politician, and presumably Trump is even wealthier. Let's not forget Donnie, all right?
Pritzker's way richer than Trump, guarantee it.
Well, I think he's only worth $3 billion. That's, I know only, right? But young Donald says he's worth more than that, so who knows? He won't reveal his tax force. But anyway, get to the main point. Yes. And I guess Rauner doesn't count anymore because he's no longer our governor. I do not believe that J.B. Pritzker shovels his walk. No, I don't. I shovel mine today, by the way.
Yeah. How'd that go?
You know, it's okay. I prefer like the broom now. I'm really into like sweeping off.
Well, I'm glad you did that motion because I didn't know what you were talking about.
Yeah, I like the broom.
Sweeping.
So, yeah, it was
no chance at all that J.B. Pritzker shovels his own
Well, I
driveway.
didn't say no chance. I just said, you asked me, do I think he does? And no. If I'm the richest guy, well, okay, again, I didn't mean to go there. If I have $3 billion, I'm not shoveling my walk. I'll hire you to do it. Yo, D, get over here.
Okay, sure. Some big dumb guy. Hey, I'll do anything you say, Ben. Whatever you say. All right.
I shovel my own walk, all right? There we go.
This JB Pritzker. We threw that question over to all of those listening on the live stream chat. What's happening? Does Governor JB Pritzker shovel his own driveway and sidewalk? Several of you have weighed in, and we'll be reading your responses before we go to the break. All right, Ben, the Chicago Sun-Times Democratic congressional primary candidate endorsements have been pouring through the headlines all week. And it looks like a reoccurring Ben Joravsky Show guest has been endorsed. It was announced this week that the Chicago Sun-Times have endorsed Democratic 7th Congressional District candidate one Anthony Clark in his primary election against Keena Collins and incumbent Danny K. Davis.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that, D. You know, Anthony Clark's been coming on whatever show I've had for 3 years. He's a teacher at Oak Park River Forest. And he ran against Danny K. Davis in 2018. I think he's got. I think he's one of the bright voices in the Democratic Party. He's smart. He's got an interesting view of the world. I love talking to him. I told him, win or lose, he's always going to be a guest on whatever show I have, as long as I have a show, obviously. So I was really impressed. You know, I got this feeling that anybody that I like, mainstream papers will not like. And it's not always true. By the way, Keena Collins, also in the race. She's come on the show several times. So, yeah, it's good. I was really impressed that Anthony Clark got the endorsement of my beloved Bright One. So I guess I have to congratulate my beloved Bright One, for.
Anything you'd like to say to Anthony Clark right now?
Congratulations, young man. All right? Congratulations. Now, getting a newspaper endorsement is not the same thing as winning an election, and that's going to be a tough election to win. Danny K. Davis has been the incumbent congressperson since the 90s, and you know how people get when it comes to their Congress people. They recognize a name, and they go, I'll vote for that person. So it's going to be tough to defeat an incumbent congressman, but congratulations, AC.
Yes, a reoccurring guest on the Ben Joravsky Show, endorsed by the Sun-Times. Ben, things continue to keep looking up for us. Our download numbers have doubled since we last started, when we started last year. We're slowly but surely developing a natural, organic following through word of mouth and endless content, by the way, that you can find at both Chicago Reader and Chicago Sun-Times websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Good times. And, the last thing we needed was a string of our candidates not getting endorsed. And then we have some Ben Joravsky candidate curse rumor going around. You know what I mean? We don't want that. That would have been really bad.
Yeah. Like anybody who comes on the Ben Joravsky Show is just not going to get...
the Benny J. Don't go on that show.
No, because you won't get endorsed by anybody resembling mainstream Chicago.
Not happening. At least right now, not happening. All right?
Matumbo, negatory.
Hang tight, non-sports fans. But, Ben, you know what would be about as equally as bad?
What?
You and me getting on that Mayor Lightfoot's do not hire list. Whoa, that would be awful.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we were just...
I got a feeling you might already be on that one, D.
Yes.
Not you, but me.
Well, for those who don't know, Ben was just talking about it. Yeah, that is a thing. And former Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson, you just made the list.
Yeah, I thought that was really unfair. Again, we don't know. The full story has not been told on Eddie Gate. There's always investigations. There's always reports about to come out. That's the thing about Chicago. That's what I'm saying. It's like McCarthyism around here. It's always like, wait for this report to come out. Wait for this report to come out. It's like Kim Fox, just an endless series of reports and investigations. Wait for this one to come out. So they always keep that cloud over their heads. Wait for this one to come out. And Eddie Johnson served this city well in the 3 years that he was police chief. We could argue about whether he was too quiet beforehand on issues of police brutality, but when Rahm Emanuel turned to him and asked him to step in a very critical moment in police relations with the black community of the city of Chicago, I think he did an admirable job in those 3 years. He did not deserve just this piling on that's going on, and to slap him, further humiliate him by putting him on a do not hire list. Like, duh, he wasn't going to get hired anyway. I mean, Lori Lightfoot was not going to hire him. What if Lori Lightfoot will not be mayor forever, right? You may run in 8 years or whatever.
You never know.
So that next mayor may want to hire Eddie Johnson, or maybe not. Eddie Johnson may just want to retire. But just the humiliation of putting him on a do not hire list is overkill. I just think do not hire lists in general. I remember when the Board of Education, now I'm all fired up on this one. I remember in the Board of Education, the CPS, back in the day, about 10 years ago, this is the age of when we, from Daley to Rahm, this was in that anti-teacher day when the quote-unquote school reformers of the world had decided that everything wrong with public education in poor districts was bad teachers. If we could only get rid of bad teachers, and that's bad in quotes, we could suddenly students from the poorest of neighborhoods would be scoring like students from Wilmette and Lake Forest. That was the attitude they actually had. It's still prevalent in some places. So they would fire teachers and put them on the do not hire list. I wrote a lot of stories about this. I thought it was unfair then. I thought it was McCarthyism then. I thought this notion of like secret lists that people are punished for life was ridiculous then, overkill then, and I think it's ridiculous now. I do not know what Eddie Johnson did to warrant this, and I certainly don't know what Bill McCaffrey did. That, again, is the kid who worked, he was the spokesperson for the law department. Oh, yeah, I'm probably stepping
The following
on your...
comes from the Chicago Sun-Times.
I'm fired up about it,
I
D.
know you are. The following comes from the Chicago Sun-Times and the one and only Fran the Woman Spielman, host of the Fran Spielman podcast.
Which is recorded where?
Right here.
Right here. Just wanted
I
to say.
record it. I sit there and watch and record it. It's the personnel equivalent of a scarlet letter that bars them from being hired by the city and raises a red flag for any private employer. That's particularly true for Eddie Johnson, who might otherwise land a job in corporate security. This 29-page list of untouchables released to the Chicago Sun-Times in response to a Freedom of Information request includes 689 names. By the way, more than 100 of those have been added in the 9 months since Lightfoot took office.
100 since Lightfoot took office. Wow, you're definitely on that list.
Hey, come on.
Do not hire Dr. Doobie.
Oh,
They'd have
boy.
to have like 3 different names for you. A.K.A. Dr. Doobie, A.K.A. Dr. D, A.K.A. the man, the myth, the legend from Alton, A.K.A. White Lightning.
AKA bald douchebag. All are listed as, quote, ineligible to rehire for a period defined as, quote, indefinite.
Wow, that indefinite, that sounds like a long time.
For Johnson, the reason is listed as, quote, retirement under inquiry. Also on the do not...
What does that even mean?
Over my head.
It's so bureaucratic on top of everything else. What is it? Retirement what?
Retirement under inquiry.
Come on. Mayor Lightfoot, let's just take this do not hire thing. Just like Nancy Pelosi did to Donald Trump's.
Oh, that was good.
You know, by the way, I'm with you 100%, Nancy Pelosi. I'm not bending in the breeze because my lefty listeners go, we don't like you. Here, there we go.
Oh, and there went all the live stream listeners. They're not listening now. Also on the do not hire list, Ben mentioned it, former law department spokesman one, Bill McCaffrey. He was fired alongside with Johnson on December. The reason listed for Bill McCarthy.
McCaffrey.
I don't know why I put McCarthy.
Yeah.
Discharge.
What the heck does that even mean? Discharge? Sounds horrible.
That sounds gross.
Yes, discharge.
Eddie Johnson could not be reached for comment, but his attorney, one Tom Needham, said the designation was, quote, completely unnecessary, mean-spirited, and serves no purpose other than to demean and hurt a good man who had a fine career.
I agree with Needham. There you go. I agree with Attorney Needham. Absolutely. What purpose does it serve to put Eddie Johnson on a duty? He's not going to get hired anyway. No one's going to hire him. So why do you like the secret list? This does get back to McCarthyism. The secret lists. You're on a list. Shh. Don't tell anybody. Go looking for a job. You don't get the job. You don't get a call back because you're on the list.
I haven't got a call back from that one job, guys, so maybe. A couple weeks back, remember?
Look, man.
I had my tie on. Haven't heard back.
Yeah, God bless you, man. You got the Scarlet Ben Joravsky letter in this town. Well, you work with Ben Joravsky.
You know, for some reason, I got Milwaukee on my mind. I don't know why.
You may have to go further away than all the nasty things I said about cheeseheads. I take it all back, cheeseheads, okay? I love you.
By the way, what a great name for a lawyer, Needham.
Needham, man.
I need him.
Needham's fighting for his client. You know what a lawyer who stands up for his client.
What an awesome name for a lawyer. All
I
right.
need him. Yeah.
I need him.
I'm with Needham 100%. Come on, it's overkill. Eddie Johnson was already fired. His name was plastered all over every newspaper. They're talking about it. Oh, we're shocked. Oh, God, all the Chicago journalist community was just shocked and outraged by these allegations. And oh, my God. So
All right.
why do you put him on a do not hire list?
Well,
why
if
do you
we're-
even have a do not hire list?
If we're not on the list, if we keep going, we're going to be. So
Oh.
let's move on.
I got
Today,
this.
Mayor Lightfoot is at Gallery 7 to deliver remarks at the NBA Voices Youth Leadership Summit.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
God, you got your board back, man. I missed that.
All
By
right.
the way, can I give a shout out to Eric Zorn?
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy Eric Zorn of the Chicago Tribune. And he put on his play the thing he's got, D. You know, he put it on his.
Oh, you got to set it up a little better now.
I didn't go to radio school.
Eric Zorn sent us a Facebook message last night, and he let us know of his new ringtone that's on his phone.
That's right.
He's got a new ringtone. Eric, this is legit true. Eric Zorn's new ringtone.
I'm not a perfect person.
That's so cool.
When he put it on Facebook, I was cracking up, man. Can you imagine that's the ringtone? I am not a perfect person. For 10 trivia points, when did J.B. Pritzker say that? Do you remember?
Oh, he said that right after the Blago tapes were released, right?
Come on, ladies and gentlemen. He remembers.
All right.
And by the way, Michael Bloomberg, you might want to listen to that speech as you go around apologizing for your stop and frisk policies. You know, I am not a perfect person.
Oh, actually, he did. We do have a quote from Michael Bloomberg about that. Oh, sorry, it's just the sound of money.
Okay.
No quotes. Just
money, money, money.
All right, we just read some of her article. Now you should go download her podcast. It's the Fran Spielman Show. Once a week, Fran, the woe man, sits down and goes one-on-one with a Chicago political figure and puts them in the hot seat. And guys, she's legit really good at it. Listen as a guest gets really comfortable. Then all of a sudden, Fran pops him with a great question. Oh, habita. It's an awesome podcast. Go check it out. This week's guest, Cook County State's Attorney, Donna Moore.
For 10 trivia points, what high school did Donna Moore go to?
Why would I know that? Ice Cube High School.
No, you know, because I already told you. All that reefer you smoked is catching up with you. Remember, her older brother went to high school with me.
I
at
just
Evanston?
choose what to hear and not to hear when you talk.
But I don't know her. I didn't know her back then. She's younger, you know, like everybody else in the world. She's younger than me.
All right, so go download the show. It's the Fran Spielman Show every week at the Chicago Sun-Times website or wherever else you download your favorite podcast. Like I said, I record the Fran Spielman Show. I'm sitting right here. Donna Moore was giving an interview with Fran. Donna Moore, pretty cool. Seems like just a regular person. She didn't have like personnel with her or anything. She just came solo. Check the interview out, everybody. All right, now we go to the live stream chat room. Shout out to all of you for weighing in. Today's big question. Does our filthy rich Illinois governor shovel his own driveway or sidewalk on snowy days like this? Ben, what was your answer again?
My answer was I do not believe he does.
Yeah. Believe it or not, everyone on the live stream agrees. Pat Rod says, JB don't shovel no sidewalk, but it's okay because he's not a perfect person.
That's good,
That's
man.
pretty good.
That's pretty good. Send him the car or something, man.
All right, more of you. Kyle, you're always hilarious. He says, can the Pritzkers even identify a shovel? Have any Pritzker ever held a shovel or seen a shovel in the wild?
in a while being the key word.
In the wild.
Oh, in the wild. Okay, got it.
Let's see. KMA Barry, what's up? He says, JB shovels with his unused toilet plunger. Okay. We're never forgetting that one, are we?
No, we're not going to get over that one for a while, are we?
Okay, let's see. Steven, what's going on, Steven? He says, he's responding to Kyle saying, as a representative of the Pritzker family, I will have you know that JB owns several shovel companies and has been a leading light in shovel innovation. That's very good. All right,
Shovel innovation.
All right, let's see. Ricky weighs in. Says Pritzker shoveling while sitting on one of his... Okay, another toilet joke.
All right, guys. It didn't work for Rauner. He tried to make... Remember when Rauner, at the commercials, when it was Toiletgate was erupting?
Yeah.
Had the J.B. Pritzker Toilet Company. Remember that? that didn't really work so well.
Let's say here, KMA Barry also weighed in. Can't JB work out an arrangement with Lori and have streets and sanitation take care of his shoveling requirements?
Well, that worked for Ed Burke. If you recall, Ed Burke I wonder if he still gets it. He would be put at the front of the list. His street would be shoveled before anybody, or cleaned before anybody else's. So maybe JB could cut a deal with Ed Burke.
All right, I think that's all we got there for the JB Pritzker shoveling question.
All right.
Feel free to weigh in on the live stream, everybody. We'll more than likely read your answer. And hey, I guess we're going to find out sooner or later if JB Pritzker has a do not hire list out there, huh?
I don't know, man. I just don't think that's JB Pritzker style. I hope not. But listen, I'll end it with this. I think they should take that do not hire list and do to that list what Nancy Pelosi did to Donald John Trump's speech. Shh. There's no reason to have a do not hire list. It sounds like a political hit list.
All right. People are weighing in on the do not hire list as well. We got some time until Miles Kampf-Lassin enters the studio, so we'll go ahead and read them. Kyle, as always, very persistent and on fire, says indefinite do not hire list. Good God. Ah, yes, I remember the parable that Jesus talked about called F-word forgiveness. Kyle also says, let's see here. Great, Lightfoot has a Nixon-esque enemies list. That seems healthy and doesn't seem like it will enable resentment.
Yeah, here's the list. The part of the article where Francis Spillman explains what you have to do to get off the list. The criteria for getting off the list also may warrant a second look. As it stands, those on the list may petition for removal only once every 2 years and only after providing proof the designation is, quote, no longer valid or should be excused. Okay, this really is Orwellian. They don't even tell, like in the case of McCaffrey, we don't even know why he's on the list, what he did wrong to get on the list. So now he has to, what does he have to do? Has to provide proof that the designation is no longer valid or should be excused. Well, if we don't know why he was designated in the first place, how can he come up with proof that it's no longer valid? It's McCarthyism. Take that list, pretend you're Nancy Pelosi, and it's Donald Trump's State of the Union speech, and rip it up.
All right, Miles Kampf-Lassin has entered the studio. We'll pose the question to him real quick before we go to break. I don't know if he's been listening or not, but the question of the day, since it's so snowy out there, and it seems like J.B. Pritzker's got the day off, no public events scheduled. You may want to pull your microphone up a little closer there. Does J.B. Pritzker shovel his own driveway or sidewalk?
Hard to believe that the guy with extra toilets to, get the tax rebates out there shoveling his walk, but maybe, JB's kind of an old school kind of guy, He loves Gilligan's Island. He likes the Eagles, right?
Yeah, he does love the Eagles. He loves Gilligan's Island. I
thought
forgot that part.
I know he likes Lost. There was that classic campaign ad where he went in about his pop culture.
Yeah, I don't remember Gilligan's Island or Lost. I remember the Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles.
I did not see eye to eye with him on the Eagles. Not a big Eagles fan on this show.
I hope JB's out there doing it.
Perfect person.
So there you are, everybody. Feel free to weigh in on the live stream chat. Wow, you can talk about more things than J.B. Pritzker shoveling his driveway. We welcome that as well. We'll be right back. Miles Kampf-Lassin is with us. We're going to talk all things Bernie, progressive politics, and more Bernie. It's the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. Chicagoland Cremation landcremationoptions.com. One more time, Chicago, landcremationoptions.com.
I'm here with former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Chief of Staff to President Obama, somebody that knows Joe Biden very well. Give us your rating of his performance so far, Rahm.
Well, I think Joe Biden brought energy. That was his first, I think, hurdle he had to clear. He brought passion to this effort, and I also thought he brought a nice, more, it was a gesture to Beto, the way he handled, obviously, what happened in El Paso. So on that level, he's engaged, and I also think he did something very smart. On healthcare, he made Bernie his foil, not Elizabeth Warren, which was smart in that effort in that time. I also got to say this. I thought Amy, Kamala, and Beto all had their moments. I think the person that got hurt so far is Castro. He looked mean.
He looked petty, some people were saying on Twitter, but we will see. There's still about...
Hey, welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Miles Kampf-Lassin in the studio, the pride and joy of Whitney Young High School. Once a Dolphin, always a Dolphin. He's here, though, not as a Dolphin.
Let's hear that dolphin roar.
I don't even know what our.
You're the Dolphins. You didn't know that?
I know very well.
Were you on the swim team?
I was not on the swim. I wasn't on any. I wasn't good enough to be on any of the teams. I played basketball in 8th grade. I was an Ackie there, so in the academic
Oh my
center,
God,
so.
folks, an Ackie. Those are like the super smart kids.
Oh yeah. A little nerdy. So yeah, did not make Whitney Young's men's basketball team. But
they're a hell of a basketball.
But Jahil Okafor, we got there's a lot of Whitney Young pride and joy.
That is correct.
Cases.
A great basketball player. DeFranz Smart. Let's give DeFranz a shout out. All right, Miles Kampf-Lassin, but he's here not as a Whitney Young grad, not as a resident of Beverly, not as a lifelong Chicagoan, but as a journalist for In These Times, big-time Bernie Sanders supporter. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a long time. I'm going to put on at the back end of the list to get to it. The New York Times, curious attitude toward Bernie Sanders. I'm a lifelong reader of the New York Times, a home subscriber to the New York Times, so I'm supporting this edifice, okay? Their hostility to Bernie Sanders is beyond... I don't understand it, and I know you're a Bernie Sanders supporter. Right now, he's number one on my list. I'm not as passionate for him as you are, so I understand the consternation that moderates have, but Miles, they're over the top. You know what? Let's just talk about it now. Yeah. I've raised this. Here's the headline on the New York Times today. Sanders on rise, anxiety deepens among centrists. Now, I know my beloved centrists, I talk to them all the time, are a little concerned. But anxiety deepens among centrists over Bernie Sanders. It seems like they're really trying to provoke this notion, provoke centrists to broadcast this notion that Bernie Sanders would be the end of the Democratic Party. That not only would Donald Trump win re-election if Bernie Sanders is the nominee, but the Senate would remain Republican. The House would go back to being Republican, and Democrats all down the list would lose. And Miles, I'm just going to point out to you, the most popular president for many New York Times writers was the president who was in the White House when the Democrats lost the House, lost the Senate, and lost many down ballot positions, lost state legislative seats, and that would be one Barack Obama. So this notion that Bernie's leftist rhetoric and worldview will mean gloom and doom for the Democrats is not really borne out by recent history, if you follow what I'm saying. So please explain, do you share my sense that the New York Times has this deep hostility to Bernie Sanders?
Well, so the headline you just read is a news headline, and if you go a few pages in, you go to the opinion section, you see Nicholas Kristof's opinion article, and it says, "I worry about Sanders and his coattails." So, it's a paper that is like, speaking to itself in so many ways, and therefore not really reaching so many, what is fueling Bernie Sanders' rise in popularity. The reason he's, the most liked candidate in the race, the reason he's the most trusted on all of the issues that Democratic voters list as the most important to them, from, health care to dealing with the levels of economic inequality in our country, that's not shared by the editorial board of the New York Times. That type of, the reason that he's appealing to all the Democratic electorate populations that he has won in the two races that he's won, that's just not reflected by Nicholas Kristof, for example, or you saw Thomas Friedman writing an ode to Michael Bloomberg, basically pleading with him to come in and take over the race and be the adult in the room. James Carville, this longtime Clinton operative, said pretty much exactly what you just said. I mean, he said this will be the end of days for the Democratic Party if Bernie Sanders is elected. What we all need to keep in mind, I think, we just went through an election where the New York Times and all of the media establishment assured us that there was one candidate who was most qualified in history, who was uniquely positioned to take on not just Donald Trump and but the Republican Party as a whole, because they'd fought against the Republicans and been vetted and checked off every box that they're now listing as reasons Bernie Sanders can't win the nomination. That candidate, Hillary Clinton, lost to Donald Trump in a very disastrous fashion. I mean, she of course won the popular vote, but she's not president today, and the Senate is in Republican hands. We have new Supreme Court justices, 2 new appointments by Donald Trump. They're going to change the judicial landscape in this country for decades going forward. So there was never any accountability by these same, pontificators and commentators who were advising us we needed to be safe. We needed to take the safe route, go with a centrist, go with somebody that's, not going to rattle the boat or anything. Well, that's the same reason that they're giving for backing Michael Bloomberg or backing Joe Biden right now, when what we see is we're in clearly an anti-establishment mood in the country right now. People are sick and fed up of how they've been treated by the way the healthcare system has treated them. The fact that there was no accountability for this financial crisis that wiped out people's savings for decades going forward in their lives. They're upset, and they're not seeing their wages grow. They're not seeing any type of meaningful change. They're not seeing healthcare coverage really expand to reach the people that have been shut out of the healthcare system for their entire lives. And what Bernie Sanders represents is a change to that system. And therefore it is a threat. And the reason that there's so much hand-wringing, I think, is partially because these people all have an economic and personal interest in maintaining the status quo. They know that if they might keep their jobs as commentators at the New York Times, but so many of these people have other gigs, other places. Their family members are related, are working for their campaigns or involved in think tanks, and the whole, ecosystem of politics that exists right now that has been fairly consistent throughout various different Democratic administrations. And that likely would not be the case if Bernie Sanders is president, because he would appoint, a new DNC, he'd be turning to different types of think tanks, different types of advisors that have traditionally been involved in the Democratic Party. So I think people really see him as a personal threat to them. That doesn't mean that, he's going to blow up the Democratic Party. I mean, he's definitely going to change it and drive it in a different direction. But there's no evidence to any of these claims people are saying. Of course, you could raise the specter of the Democrats losing the House and the Senate and try to freak people out. But, there's no evidence to back that up other than saying, Bernie Sanders is a unique candidate, and we haven't really seen one run on a major party ticket in the same way. But that's the same evidence that Bernie Sanders gives for why he's best positioned to bring out new voters, to appeal to independents, to galvanize young voters who traditionally have not been as engaged in the political system. So I just think, we're going to see more of this, right? It seems like every time there's any type of boost to Bernie Sanders in winning an election or him rising in the polls, there's an immediate backlash of some sort. And so much of this has just been, the same people that we constantly hear from talking about why the Democratic Party needs to take a more moderate lane. Now they're saying, we can't risk a candidate running who just happens to disagree with those policy positions. And so I think we should understand it as, this is their personal interest at stake.
Well, I'm listening to what you're saying, and I realize that you're correct, that this is a very unique moment in Democratic politics, in American politics. Bernie Sanders has gotten further than any other candidate of his ideology. No Democratic candidate is as far left as Bernie is. No prominent Democratic candidate. I remember when Dennis Kucinich ran back in 2008, I think it was. He ran in 2008. He was completely on the fringes of the Democratic Party. His campaign ended after Iowa. Howard Dean, who's not even as left as Bernie on many issues, his candidacy ended after Iowa. It was at 2004, I want to say, against John Kerry. So Bernie has gotten further than anybody else. He's 2 for 2. He won Iowa, popular vote anyway, if we can trust anything that comes out of Iowa in terms of vote counting. And he just won New Hampshire. We're going to talk about that in greater detail. So he's gotten further. So we don't know. I can't sit here, Miles, and say definitively that Bernie Sanders will be elected, that he will carry the Senate, that he will bring the Democrats back in charge of the Senate. I don't know. I also do not know that there's the model that James Carville represents does not work. The model that Carville represents and the New York Times is advocating has never sustained a Democratic majority. Yeah. They never held on. Democrats would. It's all based on his famous line is, "It's the economy, stupid." So, like, if the economy is bad, Democrats will prevail and will take control. As soon as the economy improves a little bit, Democrats lose. Yeah. So the notion that you link your party to the downfall of the economy is you hope that doesn't last. You follow what I'm saying? Because you hope that we don't have depression in this country.
Well, and I think it depends on what you look at as the indicators for what is the economy doing well mean. Donald Trump is going and giving his State of the Union, bragging and boasting about how stock market's hitting new heights and, we're creating all these new jobs and lowering unemployment. Well, look at the actual indicators for people's jobs. I mean, wages are stagnant. Most people don't have enough money to deal with, a family emergency, basically, have cash on hand to deal with some kind of devastating injury or because their health care isn't covered. Most people in this country are at the whim of their employer. They don't have security at their job. They don't have the just cause employment. The fact is that unemployment is going down, but people are also working more, taking on more work in order to cover the same basic expenses that were much more easily covered 10, 15, 30, 40 years ago. The trend lines of economic life in this country are it's becoming harder and harder to survive. College expenses, debt is exploding, household debt is exploding. These are all things that people actually deal with on a daily daily basis. It may be that the stock market's doing well, but as we saw from this tax bill that Trump passed in 2017, over 80% of the gains are going to the super rich. That's how this economy has been set up. It's so that we're not pushing on the most profitable corporate entities in this country to actually cover social programs that would uplift working people in this country. In fact, we're setting up the economy so it's impossible for people to even get those benefits. They have to jump through hoops, and everything's means tested. The most popular programs in this country are Social Security and Medicare. Why? Because they're universal. They cover people. You're 65 and you can access Medicare. You get a Social Security payment, and people love that. They want to hold on to that, and that is the kind of thing that's under threat, both by what Donald Trump says. He just put out a budget that would slash social programs, and what, the supposedly electable centrist moderate Democrats like Joe Biden have been pushing, is also cuts to these same types of programs. That's why Bernie Sanders running on an agenda says, no, expand them. We got to make, corporations pay their fair share. I mean, I take your point of like he has the most left-wing ideology, but I don't think most people are caring about ideology. They're caring about like how somebody is running for president and what their not just what their agenda is and what their plans are, but how they view the world. And what Bernie constantly says is healthcare is a human right. Public college should be free, tuition free. You shouldn't have to be loaded with this student debt. And that's just he's making his claim, and he has policies to back that up. But it's not so much. I don't think it's so much about. I don't think people are choosing him because of ideology. They're choosing him because he's making a lot more sense than the standard political fare that we've been offered for so many decades in our lives.
Well, I mentioned his left wing. The reason in that particular moment I mentioned his left wing ideology, and I'll go back to this point, is that let's put aside any notion that the reason some of these commentators are against Bernie, as you were suggesting, is they have a vested interest in being against Bernie. All right, let's just put that to aside, and let's just assume that they have a genuine concern about not seeing Trump reelected. Sure. Okay, let's just work from that assumption that they're honorable people and they're concerned. They're working from an assumption that's embedded in the last 40 years of elections, that if you go too far to the left, you will lose. And this is embedded in the 1972. It's the foundation piece of this is the 1972 presidential election, when George McGovern got clobbered by Richard Nixon. And that's the lesson, the prevailing lesson that has ruled the Democratic Party ever since. And so the notion that somebody who is to the left of where probably McGovern was, or had a campaign very similar to one that Jesse Jackson had in '88, would be the standard bearer, is uncharted waters. Nobody knows. We never had one before. So we don't know what the impact would be. So I can't sit here and say absolutely Carville's wrong. I just know he doesn't know either.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're exactly right. I mean, it's all to say that this is people getting paid to pontificate, and that very, very well might be their number one concern. Might be politically trying to defeat Donald Trump and really seeing Bernie Sanders as more of a risk. What I would just ask those people, or counter that with, is what we have seen is that Bernie Sanders has raised more money than any other and from more donors than anybody else running for president ever in American history, right? He's built up a grassroots movement that is powered by the very communities that are key to Democrats winning, to young people, and specifically young people of color and low-income voters that traditionally don't come out. These are the people that form the backbone of his campaign, as we've talked about before. The people that are his most common donors are people that work at chain stores and are teachers and work at the post office. This is the exact opposite of the approach of not just Michael Bloomberg, who's completely self-funding his campaign with his many, many billions of dollars, but also all of these politicians that continually dial for corporate dollars, or they host fundraisers in wine caves, and therefore that
judge
and that impacts the type of communities that they're trying to represent.
Yeah.
And so I would just posit that, look, if you want, it's going to be a risk, no matter what. Who we nominate against Donald Trump is going to be a risk. If it's Joe Biden, who keeps finishing 4th, 5th place,
it won't be Joe Biden.
If it's Michael Bloomberg, who is just running this complete plutocracy style campaign where he's just saying, I can buy this election for you, so go with me, or whether it's one of these other centrists that are just changing their agendas completely based on which way the wind is blowing, like Pete Buttigieg, in order to get a leg up. They're all going to be a risk against Donald Trump. So maybe it, is not such a crazy idea to think that Bernie Sanders, the candidate that is, commanding the most support from the very communities the Democratic Party says it is, that it is supposed to represent, maybe they're the candidate, and the one that happens to be winning the elections, maybe that is the best candidate that's set to go against Trump. And also, I'd posit, look, Trump said on this phone call that got released through this Lev Parnas case that the one candidate he didn't want Hillary Clinton to pick as her vice presidential nominee in 2016 was Bernie Sanders. And because he, as Trump said, he's smart on trade. He's right about trade. He stands up for working people. He said the same thing about, Bloomberg versus Sanders. He'd much rather go up against Bloomberg than Sanders. So I don't know if Trump knows what is going to be best either, if we should even believe him. But all the indications are that Sanders would be a formidable opponent to Donald Trump.
Well, the common theme that is almost in every single one of those. I see you have the New York Times. You printed out the New York Times columns because poor Miles. I gave him an assignment. Read these columns, and the common theme that comes up in every single one, or common point that they make over and over again, is wait till the public sees the pictures of Bernie Sanders on his honeymoon in the Soviet Union, and I'm like. Nothing to me says you're out of touch like thinking that the public cares about the. Do you realize there's another story in the New York Times that while they're writing this, there is a radio station in Kansas. Was it Kansas? I want to say I'm suddenly blanking. Maybe it wasn't Kansas. I apologize. No, it is in Kansas City, so it's Missouri. That is run by Putin. It's Sputnik Radio. And it's basically coming at a very Trumpian worldview about how liberals are destroying our country. Okay, so suddenly the message is somehow or other going to be that Bernie Sanders is a threat because he took his honeymoon in the Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore, right? Okay, most millennials don't even vaguely are aware that it ever existed. And the current president of Russia, who is an ally of Donald Trump, used to run the KGB. So somehow or other, we're going to be really frightened about Bernie Sanders' honeymoon in the Soviet Union in the 80s, even though Donald Trump's ally is Putin. The things they worry about. Yeah. Miles, do you follow what I'm saying?
That's not. I mean, I've spent a lot of time knocking doors, not just for Bernie Sanders, for all kinds of candidates and causes. I've never heard anybody at the doors talk about Russia.
No,
gotta say. So I do understand these are real issues, but.
And I wanted to play the Chuck Todd clip. I'm sure you've heard this,
Please.
right? Oh yeah. This happened on Monday. All of political news.
Hey, I want to bring up something that has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade. I mean, except for Donald Trump. The question no one is asking is this: what if you can't win the presidency without an online mob? What if we now live in a world where having a bullying agro-social media army,
murdered in the Holocaust by Hitler's army, and it's really sick the levels that people are going to in order to defame him and his supporters. That's calling people a mob, and it just has the impact of reinforcing so much of people's cynicism about politics and the media establishment, because people don't. It's similar. I mean, it's different, but it's similar to the deplorables comment. It has the impact. These things have the impact of people feeling like they're not being represented. If anything, they're being talked down to, and treated as if they don't matter by the political and media elite in this country, of which Chuck Todd is a perfect emblem. So, I mean, it's very disturbing to hear that kind of language, but it's just become normal fare in our political culture right now.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders is coming at things from a different vantage point, to put it mildly, than like a Chuck Todd, and so in that respect, I guess he's frightening. In that respect, like the mainstream types would turn against him, and invariably the questions would all underscore a point. How could you possibly win? How do you possibly think you could win? And it's building and building and crescendo. Not only can he not possibly win, but he'll bring down every single Democrat. And I'll just repeat this. I just got to say this one more time. It was on Barack Obama's watch that the Democratic Party lost the Senate and the House.
And almost 1,000 state seats across the country.
Yeah. So the old model isn't working. This is what really bothers me about my beloved Democratic Party, among many things, Miles, is that they don't seem to try to figure out what went wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, we need a better candidate. This one. The last candidate was bad. That's what went wrong. And as opposed to just a better, I don't know, a message that might mean something to people, a political program that might help people taking a stand against just all the programs, cuts that both parties have advocated, taking a stand against everything like from stop and frisk to arresting people for reefer. I mean, it just, do you follow what I'm saying?
Well, I think that, what we saw in Bernie Sanders' New Hampshire victory speech, I think really was a general election preview of his argument, what he plans to run on. And what was that about? It was about, Trump is a liar and a fraud, and he's betrayed working people in this country. He said he was going to get health care to everybody. He said he would never cut Social Security, Medicare, Social Security. He said that he was going to bring jobs back. He said he was going to stop offshoring of jobs. He said he was going to, fight these bad trade deals and renegotiate everything. Well, what do we have? We've got, a trade deal that doesn't even mention climate change, for one thing, the USMCA, the new NAFTA 2.0, but also which would hardly bring any American jobs back, even by all the most optimistic indicators. We've seen him relentlessly attack Medicare and Social Security. His Justice Department right now is trying to, relitigate Obamacare so that they can repeal it to throw over 30 million people off of health care. He is a threat to working people everywhere. His tax bill is just more class warfare for the rich. That's what Donald Trump represents. He's not, running against him as some kind of unique threat to democracy. I think, might turn some people on, and it's true. Look what just happened with this Roger Stone case. He's effectively taking over the Justice Department. These are all big threats, but in people's daily lives, the things that they care about is Donald Trump is not just, a threat to our democratic norms. He's just a bad Republican, who's wants to hurt working class people, and that's what Bernie Sanders has employed time and time again. And it seems to really piss off Donald Trump. So maybe that's not such a bad direction to go. And it's one thing that we didn't really see from the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016. Is targeting Trump as just a Republican who wants to undo all of the programs that American people hold so dear. She had a very different approach to how she criticized Trump than what Sanders is representing. The other thing about this whole moderate, centrist versus Bernie thing, one weird phenomenon I've never seen before is they're going through these results of New Hampshire and they're saying, Bernie won, but if you clump together these other, people, they actually did better than Bernie. So maybe Bernie didn't really win. Maybe the moderates won. As if, that's how elections work. You could just throw some people together and say their total outdoes his.
Well,
that's
madness. Okay. That gets into a talking point that I hear a lot from centrists, and that has to do with the Bernie ceiling. Yeah. I've heard this a million times. There's a ceiling on Bernie. So the people who like Bernie love him, but they're only there's some number 30, a third of the Democratic Party's electorate. Other than that, everybody is turned off. So he can't rise. And so that's the point they're reinforcing. So I could, if I wanted to play devil's advocate and get in an argument with a centrist, and I love my centrist friends dearly, all right. So you say you want to add Klobuchar and Buttigieg together to beat Bernie. Well, I'll take Warren, add him to Bernie. Give me Andrew Yang. Yeah. I'll add him to Bernie. Yeah. I guess Tulsi Gabbard, I got to add her to Bernie, and so on. And so,
there's so many ways you could just pull out the math on this, but none of it. Look, this is a delegate race. We're going to see 40% of the delegates up for grabs on Super Tuesday, where the majority, or the highest number of them in California, where Bernie Sanders is consistently pulling ahead. We're going to see, finally Michael Bloomberg actually come onto the scene. Well, it's going to be very, different after that point in early March, even after, Vegas and South Carolina, which are Nevada and South Carolina, which are coming up as well. So I don't think that, yes, there's a million ways to slice it. I think we're going to see the race shake up more. I think we're going to see more candidates drop out. We're going to see more candidates get behind other ones, and that could change the some of these figures in terms of support numbers. But when it comes to a ceiling, who has shown themselves to have less of a ceiling? It's you could say that, but the fact is, not only I agree. Look, I think that the biggest issue for Bernie Sanders right now is appealing to older voters, and they're the ones that are the most consistent.
Which is so bizarre.
I know, because he's the oldest candidate in the race, and he's running on the agenda that would most help senior citizens. So I think that's people that are aging, because they the ones that are dependent on Social Security, they're the ones that are still having to pay for vision and dental and all these things that would be covered under Medicare for All. I think there is a more effective case that can be made to bring those people on, because honestly, the people that are going to benefit the most immediately from Sanders' program are not just young people, are going to be seniors as well.
All right, so let's get to Bloomberg. I think I said this last time we were on the show. I say this all the time. If I'm a centrist, sorry, Mayor Pete, sorry, Amy Klobuchar, sorry, Joey Biden, my vote would be with Bloomberg. They're all the same in terms of the worldview, right? It's going to be more like Clintonian, Obama presidency. So go with the guy with the billions of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're all the same, that's what I would do if I were a centrist. I'm not a centrist, but that's what I would do. Mm-hmm. Do you have a feeling about this? Do you feel that centrists will coalesce about Bloomberg along these lines?
I think that Michael Bloomberg is a unique threat to our democracy, and I think that because the definition of plutocracy is government by the wealthy, and right now what we have is Donald Trump, who just brags about being billionaire all the time and talks about himself as this great real estate mogul. And what Michael Bloomberg has done is, in many ways it's very savvy and smart, in that he has just deployed his many billions of dollars into not just hiring up campaign operatives and staff with much higher salaries than any other campaign could possibly offer. So he's stealing out all these people from the field that don't believe in him necessarily because of his politics at all, but because he can pay the most. But he's also doing targeted campaigning, in that he's not actually he's not facing the press, he's not on the debate stage. Nobody actually sees Michael Bloomberg, but they do see him nonstop on their television, and he's doing micro-targeting in different communities to touch on different issues that are most important to different demographic areas where he's buying these ads. And that's what he did when he ran for mayor of New York as well, and he's very successful at it because he has a whole operation. He runs a massive media empire. So this guy's got, he knows what he's doing in a way a lot of these other incredibly wealthy, would-be politicians don't understand in the same way. The problem is that he ran New York City like, authoritarian in many ways. I mean, if you care about civil liberties, look what was going on in New York. He rounded up protesters during the RNC in 2004, as we remember, occupying encampments. He, mass arrests. He was also, ran the stop and frisk program that was ruled unconstitutional, that he had to go to court to defend and then lost. Also, he just attacked unions mercilessly, especially the teachers' unions when he was, and expanded charter schools in the state. This is somebody who was a Republican for most of his life, then switched over to an independent. Now he happens to be a Democrat. He openly said that his personal beliefs are far too right-wing to win with a Democratic electorate, but he's just putting his faith in the fact that people are going to be too freaked out by the prospect of Bernie Sanders' candidacy, which is only that idea is only being fueled by all these mainstream media papers that are running these types of op-eds about how it's so dangerous to nominate Sanders. And he's just thinking, what you just said, they'll come home to me because I have the most money and I can buy the election. And look, if I say I can buy Donald Trump out of office, will you get on with me? That is a huge threat to our democracy. That goes against all of our beliefs as like a society where the will of the people is what actually determines our collective fate. And so I think if any independent observer from any place came and looked and saw a presidential race that was Michael Bloomberg versus Donald Trump, they would not think very much of our American democracy. Whereas there's a candidate who is appealing to grassroots people that have never been involved in politics before, that are filling his campaign events, that are completely funding through a grassroots way his campaign. That to me speaks more to how what our aspirations should be for how people engage in the political process. process. And to me, it's very clear Bernie Sanders is the only candidate in the race that is doing that. And I think that's why he's winning. And I think that's why we're going to see him win a lot more.
All right. Now, what do you think the future for, in your opinion, Elizabeth Warren is after?
Elizabeth Warren, I think, is she's run, as I've said, a great campaign. I've been worried a little bit about the direction that her campaign might take now, because it's been clear for a long time, I think, that her path has been to gain supporters from the Bernie Sanders camp. And as he's kind of solidified his position as the progressive candidate in the race, we've seen her change that appeal and try to, we've seen voters of hers move off and go to Buttigieg, go to Klobuchar, other candidates in the race. My hope, she's been a strong progressive voice for a long time, and my hope would be that, she continues to spread that message, whether that's, through running for president or through, working to achieve many of the policy goals she has set out throughout this race of giving, everybody health care, of taking on the banking industry and providing some real regulation over our financial system in this country. I hope she continues to succeed in that venture.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling we'll be talking about this, Miles, for weeks to come, that we're heading toward a broker convention. I got this feeling. We were talking about this on election night, and a lot of people were at the bar where I was at were saying, yeah, we're going to have a broker convention. By the way, I just do a shameless plug for our March 3rd show at Promontory Point. We have a great show. Maya and I will be on stage. We got a bunch of guests that will be with us. Reader-sponsored party. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking at Lisa Salmon. She's ready to rock and roll. She'll be there.
Oh, my God, that sounds like so much fun. When is it again?
March 3rd. At the Promontory.
Super Tuesday,
man. We're gonna have Jeanette Taylor. JT's gonna be there.
JT20?
Yes, JT20 will be there. Del Marie Cobb will be there. Doesn't get better than Jeanette Taylor and Del Marie Cobb. I don't know if you know this. Del Marie Cobb, big time Hillary Clinton fan, and used to work for Hillary. Jeanette Taylor, big time Bernie fan. They're going to be on stage. I bring them all together, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Big Ten.
It's a Big Ten in the Ben Joravsky Show. So I just wanted that shameless plug. We'll be shamelessly plugged. But we're going to be talking about this all the way. I just got this feeling it's going to be a broker convention.
Yeah.
I hope.
Well, we'll see.
I'm
I
wrong,
think there's plenty of races left, right? Only 2 states have voted yet, and obviously there's territories. There's other areas that votes are going to come in from, and we could very easily see, I think, the person that's leading in the polls right now and that is most likely, by all accounts, to become the nominee, Bernie Sanders, seal up enough delegates before then. If not, we'll see what happens in Milwaukee, because that's going to be a huge test, I think, of the Democratic Party.
Well, I got a feeling, here's my prediction, that the way the tone and the tenor will emerge and develop in the coming primaries and in the coming debates will be, oh my God, it'll take me back in time to 1987, before anyone in this room was born. And Harold Washington was running for re-election, and it was Eddie Verdoliak, God, I can do this stuff, and Tom Hines were arguing who was better equipped to defeat Harold Washington. So just so you know this, folks, Harold Washington was a black man, and there was 2 white men. All right. So the notion was that if the 2 white guys run, they'll divide up the vote. So one has to drop out for the good of white people. Okay. And I'm seeing this debate emerge. You're gonna hear Amy Klobuchar, Joey Biden. You're gonna hear Michael Bloomberg. And old Mayor Pete argue that they're better suited to defeat Bernie Sanders. Yeah. It won't even be about defeating Donald Trump in November. It'll be about defeating Bernie Sanders and stopping. I got a feeling, just by reading the New York Times coverage and stuff, that's where we're headed. And that would be a damn shame, because let's say Bernie Sanders is defeated, then they have to turn on a dime. And 30% of the party, you've just given the middle finger to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for all of the calls and appeals to unity we have heard relentlessly, from Democratic Party officials, representatives, I think if you want unity, you better, nominate the person that by the end of this process has the most votes and has the most delegates, because that's the way you're going to unify, and anything else I think would be utterly divisive, and I, wouldn't wish that upon Democratic Party, especially not in a year when we're facing the most dangerous president, certainly of my lifetime, and the most critical election in my lifetime as well.
All right, we got Lisa Solomon and Sparky Rose on deck. We're going to bring them on. Before we do that, do some shameless promoting yourself, articles people should know about.
Sure, we
got
an article right now at InTheseTimes.com that I worked on and edited by Jeff Sharkey, really sharp labor reporter, actually based here, and it's all about how labor support was really critical to Bernie's win in New Hampshire. That's something that's kind of been overlooked, but the big SEIU local, one of the biggest unions in the state there, backed him. There's this growing formation called Labor for Bernie, which is a lot of rank and file union members of different unions around the country that have come together and are working to get their unions, their locals, their nationals, their internationals to back Sanders. Of course, Sanders has more union support than anybody else in the race right now, but a lot of people want to see their unions get behind him. And as we saw in New Hampshire, it can make a big difference. So check that out at InTheseTimes.com. The article's called, I think, How Labor Support Was Crucial in Bernie's New Hampshire Victory. So check that out. And we got a lot of other stuff. Also, just today, we brought on a new labor reporter who's super sharp named Hamilton Nolan, who's going to be covering labor stories for us at Working in These Times. So check that out. He's got a big article up today on the Spectrum strike, which is the longest ongoing strike in the U.S. And yeah, we'll have a lot more great stuff.
All right, very good. Miles, thanks so much for coming in. Every Thursday, Miles comes in. And as I said, Sparky Rose, Lisa Salmon on deck. Do a little reefer talk when we come back. Hey, everybody, what you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said? They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F. M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
You know, not everybody thought that I should come on this show.
And we appreciate it.
All right. Your network does not necessarily have a great deal of respect in my world. Whether you're conservative or moderate or progressive, I don't think the American people are proud that we have a president who is a pathological liar. And I say that, you know, it does not give me pleasure to say that.
And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this program. It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time, once again at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. If you go through YouTube, you can join the Ben Joravsky Show live stream chat, hang out with like-minded political people, and a few trolls. It's a good time. It's the Ben Joravsky Show live stream chat on YouTube. Hour number 2 on the way. All right, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for Thursday, February 13th is moments away. But before we get into that, we got to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program.
That's correct.
The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local 126 and District 8 are sponsors. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9 sponsored this program, as well as the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. Giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2. Let's go. It is Thursday, February 13th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, our Cannabis Conversation series continues with Lisa Solomon of the Chicago Reader and Sparky Rose. Now your host, please don't smoke marijuana in this studio, Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
All right, for the record, I have not smoked marijuana since 1980, or maybe it was 81. I can't remember because I was stoned at the time. So, yes, we continue cannabis conversation with, Lisa, we usually do the mystery guest thing. I've been revealing our mystery guest, so we'll do a greater revelation. We'll pretend we haven't revealed who he is when we bring you on. Before we bring you on, D, you got an update?
Absolutely, I do. Right now, posted at chicagoreader.com. It's the latest Chicago Reader column from our very own Ben Joravsky.
That is correct.
This week's column, wait, hold on.
That's correct.
Stealing his moves, man. This week's column is titled Chicago's Three-Card Monty. Ben Joravsky, tell us what this is all about.
I will, but just so Lisa and Sparky, our guests, know, that voice is Robert Mueller. This is the Mueller Report. So while I talk about my current column, Sparky, please read the Mueller Report and then tell us, distill it for us, okay? I may be the only person in the world who's actually read the Mueller Report. All right, this column, I talked about it already. We did a whole bit on this column, Three-Card Monty. It's an excellent column, I must say so myself. Ron, don't walk to read it. After the show, of course.
What's it about?
It's all about TIFs, tax increment financing, one of my favorite topics, TIFs. That's where they slap a surcharge on your property tax to fuel a slush fund controlled by the mayor of the city of Chicago. Folks, if you like it, go along with it.
If you know Ben Joravsky, you know he loves talking about TIFs, and that is what's in this week's Ben Joravsky column. And also, when you get done reading that, you can listen to Beyond the Column. It's a brand new weekly podcast that me and Ben do. And we do it at his house. You can hear the Brown line every 10 minutes. It's kind of funny.
No, you know what? And what I love about Beyond the Column, in addition to taking the deep dive on what I wrote about, is that Dennis takes a column that I've written. I've been writing, Sparky, you don't know me, you never met me before. I've been writing since the days of Cheech and Chong, okay? If I could just give you a cultural reference, when they were at their primacy. And I've been writing for the Chicago Reader for a long, long time. I have a whole backlog of columns. And so what the young doctor over there does is that he'll just take that, which you do it. So like this day was like February, whatever this week is in February, from whatever year, just randomly grabs a column, and half the time I can't remember what it was I wrote.
Yeah, we look at Ben Joravsky columns past this week, or the one that's just now posted on Three-Card Monty. We take the deep dive on Three-Card Monty, find out a little bit more about that, and then we also go back in Ben Joravsky column past and talk about a column from 2008.
Yeah, man.
Find out what it is and check out Beyond the Column. It's our weekly thing. And go read this column from Ben Joravsky.
Absolutely. It's about TIFs. I can talk. I'm probably going to write another one next week because about this the 78 TIF deal that's striking my fancy. All right, no talking TIFs. We're talking a reefer, cannabis, marijuana. Lisa Solomon from the Chicago Reader. Oh, do you have something else? You ready to introduce our guest?
I'm going to talk for just a minute or two, then I'm going to introduce
Go
our
ahead.
guest. So this is an interesting weekend in Chicago. Every sports enthusiast knows it's the NBA All-Star Game.
That's
Well,
correct.
that is bringing some really interesting events to Chicago because now that cannabis is legal, you know, there have been pop-up dinners. I'm going to let our guest talk about the public consumption issue, but there are some Valentine dinners tomorrow night that people can buy tickets to. They range from a pajama jammy jam, which you can Google if you want to find it, and then there is a more elegant 4-course dinner at an art gallery with acoustic music between the courses. And that one, it's the chambalife.com, CHAMBA, if you want to find that. They do have a few seats remaining. We've got events like that. Then there's something coming up soon that is kind of a crazy Canafest that when people think about, oh, cannabis events must be depraved, this one I see some ads for is like that. It's like a woman in a thong with a guy getting ready to literally kiss her butt. So that, I don't know the organizers, not going to go into any more depth, but these dinners tomorrow night, they're like more elegant affairs. And I keep hearing there are doctors and lawyers there and, you know, people from all walks of life. So I'm going to go to a few dinners tomorrow night and check them out. And next time I'm on, I'll report back about them. And then tons of private NBA-related dinners. I hear we ran out of cannabis chefs in Chicago to supply the requests of all the players here wanting to do their own dinners. So on that note, I am going to introduce our special guest who's been in the industry for years. He knows about all aspects of it, but we're going to have him talk about public consumption, and then he might get into some other issues. We'll see where you take this, Ben. Sparky Rose, the man, the myth, the legend. I'm going to let you do your own introduction so I don't, you know, mess anything up.
Thank you very much, Lisa, Ben, and Dennis. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm Sparky Rose. I live here in Chicago. I've been in the cannabis business now for about 15 years. I used to be the executive director of an organization called Compassionate Caregivers. We won one of the first 4 cannabis business licenses ever awarded in the United States of America in the city of Oakland. I took that company and grew it to 7 dispensaries, 3 cultivation centers, about 280 employees, and revenues exceeding $5 million a month. We got shut down by the DEA, served about 3 years in federal prison for that, got out about 10 years ago, came to Chicago. My career started in brand marketing, and so I helped launch a couple of cannabis companies. Sacred, which is a local company here in Illinois, they're a CBD topicals company. Papa and Barkley, which is the #1 topicals company in California. And then I was the chief marketing officer for PharmaCann here in Oak Park for about a year. Before starting 2 agencies, 4042 North, which is a cannabis brand marketing agency down in the Loop, and Supercritical LLC. We're a capital services firm. We help investors place money with cannabis companies, and we help cannabis companies raise capital for their businesses. We also help people with their applications to, get dispensary licenses, et cetera.
Oh. Man, okay, you just gave us a lot to go with. I'm sitting there listening, and then in the middle of that sentence, you talk about 3 years served. So I have to go back to that because
most people do.
Most people do. Take the deep dive on that.
Sure. It's pretty simple. So cannabis is federally illegal, and make no mistake, other than some bylines in the budgetary bills that go through Congress every year, that's the only thing that's preventing the DEA and the Department of Justice from shutting down every cannabis company in the United States of America. Cannabis is illegal. Every company is operating illegally to this day, and they can come and get you whenever they want. They don't, because there's a provision in the budgetary bills that says the DEA and the DOJ cannot go after companies that are lawfully operating under medical cannabis programs in the states. But at the time that we got taken down by the DEA was during the George W. Bush administration, and there weren't such protections. It was before the Cole memo, et cetera. And so we got a little bit too big. We were mainstreaming cannabis. We were the largest cannabis company in the United States at the time, and they decided they had seen enough, and so they shut us down. I ended up managing to plead out. There were, not to get too much into the weeds, there were 2 busts of the same organization. The first time we got busted was by the LAPD in West Hollywood, and it was an illegal search and seizure. The LAPD doesn't have any jurisdiction in West Hollywood. They have their own city council. They have their own police department. And so as a result of that, I had sued the Treasury Department to get the $1.4 million they seized out of our bank accounts back. And I ended up using that as leverage the second time they came and arrested us. Basically, the deal was that if I gave up that lawsuit and gave up the money, they reduced my charges to maintaining a drug-involved premises and promotional money laundering, which carries no mandatory minimum but a 20-year maximum. Roll your dice with the judge, and I got sentenced to 37 months.
And did you serve the time?
I served 22 inside and 6 months in a halfway house in San Luis Obispo, California.
They sent you to a federal prison.
Yes.
Because you were running a medical marijuana dispensary?
A legal medical marijuana company in the state of California.
And it was the feds that prosecuted you and sent you to that prison? But you said the LAPD raided you. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, that's what kind of started it. So Compassionate Caregivers had a dispensary in West Hollywood. The LAPD raided it. They were doing a series of raids in and around Los Angeles at the time. And then I purchased the assets of the company from the original owner for $1 because he didn't want to get back into the business. And so I reopened a new company called New Remedies Cooperative in San Francisco as a mutual benefit corporation. And so it was a nonprofit, unlike the previous company. And then I got raided by the DEA again for that business. And when they arrested me, they got about $250,000 out of the bank, and they knew they would never get a conviction in San Francisco. It just wasn't a big enough bust. So they dropped the charges against me in San Francisco and brought me up on the charges from the previous raid down in West Hollywood. And at that point, my attorney said that I was pretty much dead to rights because you're not going to be able to argue change of venue. I was going to go to court in Los Angeles. They said you're probably going to draw an all-Asian jury, and they're going to convict. And so they said you've got to plead out, and so that's what I did.
Why all Asian? What matter would that have in it?
I don't know the demographics of the legal side, but apparently in jury selection, that's how it's going to net out. And I guess the Asian community has, at least in Los Angeles, has a strong predisposition against cannabis, or they did at the time. But yeah, on counsel, on the advice of my counsel, they said you're done. You're going to have to plead out.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate the insanity of everything you just articulated. And Sparky, this is one of my favorite themes about marijuana. But while this was happening to you in approximately 2004, did you say, was it?
2006 is when I got arrested, and then I was on pretrial release for 18 months, and then I was sentenced in 2008.
Okay, so while you were being put through these ordeals, okay, giving up your all this time in federal prison, marijuana, reefer, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, is widely used in popular culture. It's widely used by people throughout the country. So people, this is the part of the story that still I haven't got over, Sparky. You're gonna go bang, get over it. But no, it's hard for me to get over it. This schizophrenic attitude that this country has toward this drug, where so many people are indulging it, or if they're not indulging it themselves, they used to indulge it, or their friends indulge it, or their kids indulge it, and then they look the other way while the feds throw the Sparky Roses of the world. And by the way, this was going on, I don't know if you know, the Tommy Chong, his case, very similar case around the time. He had to spend time in federal prison, I believe, and it was the Bush administration. It was some attorney in the Justice Department that went after him. Some similar stories. But I don't understand. This is part of it. Like, marijuana is so pervasive in California. So many people smoke marijuana openly. You go down the boardwalk at Venice Beach, they have those dudes in the green. They used to, you know what I'm saying? Like the green med suits. Like,
oh yeah, but that's not twirling signs. Come in here.
Yeah, the doctor's in the house.
Yeah, they'll see you, and then they'll sell you what you want right then and there. Yeah.
Dude, I don't even live in California. I went through it just for the hell of it, Sparky. I got a medical marijuana card there and then. He goes, the doctor, who's, I don't even know if he's a real doctor, but he was like, so what's your problem? I go, I have anxiety. Oh, anxiety? Next thing you know.
Hang now.
So it's such a hypocrisy that the local police, would be doing the feds' dirty business.
It was really interesting. So with the LAPD, they were going after the money. They had no intention of prosecuting us. They arrested everybody and released them. They took the weed. They took the money out of the bank, and they get to keep, I believe it's half of that. They split it with the feds. And so that was the whole purpose, was a money grab. They had no interest in me at all, and neither did the feds, because when that bust went down, my attorneys contacted the Department of Justice and said, what's going on? And they said, we're not interested in Mr. Rose, Mr. Christich, who owned the company. So we're not interested in either one of them. We only sent one DEA agent and one IRS agent so they could seize the weed and seize the money, but this is entirely the LAPD's game. This is all them. And I only ended up dealing with that later because the federal government, they knew they wouldn't get a conviction against me in San Francisco, and they're not really interested in losing. They have a 98% conviction rating, so they're going to win no matter what. And so they moved it down, to LA, and I was done. And so I just had to take it on the chin.
So why did you come to Chicago? Why did you settle in this part of it?
So after I was released from prison, I had 3 years of supervised release. And for the first year, under the terms of supervised release, I had to stay where I got out of prison, which was Los Angeles. So I had to stay the first year after I got out of prison in Los Angeles. And once that was done, I was able to leave. I'm not a big fan of Los Angeles. I lived there when I was younger, and so I couldn't afford to live in San Francisco again. The costs had gone up, and of course, the feds take all your money when they take your bank account. So I came out with nothing, and so I stayed in LA and was actually doing temp graphic design work to start over. I didn't have a portfolio either. The feds took my computers when they busted me, and that along with it went my portfolio. And so after I got back on my feet, my best friend lived in Wilmette, went to New Trier, and was just like, hey, come move to Chicago. You can stay with me and the family to figure out what you want to do. And I love big cities, and it was either going to be Chicago or Austin. And my bestie said, come on out. So I did, and the rest is history. It's the best move of my life. I absolutely love and adore Chicago. I wouldn't live anywhere else, to be honest.
All right. Well, you came at a fortuitous time. And I mentioned this to you at the break. I've been crusading for the legalization of marijuana for years. And I just think the laws are utterly insane, as I just pointed out, and the hypocrisy that it shows. I still can't get over it. That said, I got to tell you, Sparky, it was like a light went on in this state. If you go back 10 years from, not even 10 years, you go back 6 years. Like, I couldn't get politicians to speak on the record about legalizing weed. Ben, can we go off the record about this one? I like it. In fact, I smoke it, but don't tell anybody. But, this is controversial. And then I would hear all, like, oh my God, I would hear so many myths that people would have about marijuana and how, the public would rise up against them. And I'm like, the public's freaking getting high, And then, but dude, Sparky, all of a sudden, within the last 2 years, marijuana is legal. You just heard Lisa run down the list of all these events. The NBA coming to Chicago they used to test players for marijuana.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The NFL is still insane. They won't let their football players use marijuana to alleviate the aches and pains. We had Norbert Pickett on the show a couple days ago. He was talking about this. He's trying to get a dispensary license in Illinois. And, the insanity, the NFL will tests for marijuana. So you still have, some of the aspects. But here in Illinois, all of a sudden, overnight, it's like the ball goes down the hill, and it's really going fast. Your timing was perfect.
I've often said, and this came to me when John Boehner decided to join Acreage Holdings. And, he railed against cannabis while he was in office, and then he got out, and he said that he'd evolved his position on cannabis. And my favorite thing is, I don't know that Charles Darwin ever realized what effect money was going to have on evolution, because it's pretty amazing. And it is. There's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of misinformation. And really, when you look at turning the stigma of marijuana or cannabis around, you're up against 20 to 30 plus years of having it drilled into generations that this is the devil's lettuce, that this is the demon weed, that this is going to turn you insane, that this is going to turn you into a heroin addict or a cocaine addict. And it takes a lot to turn that around. I've actually been very surprised at how quickly it's happened. When we started back when I was in the game in California, there were no regulations. You couldn't get a license. Cannabis testing didn't exist. We were largely a self-regulated industry. And we were just doing anything we could to not get in trouble, either with the locals or with the feds. And we did pretty good for a while. But then when finally things started to change, once Colorado legalized adult use, and you start to kind of see this cascade, and I've been impressed with how quickly things have turned. I really didn't. I figured it was going to be 10 to 20 years, I'd say, from today before we saw the legalization of cannabis nationally. Now I think you're looking at a 3 to 5 year window where whether it's considered federally legal, whether it's rescheduled, whether they just push it down to the states, but through some mechanism, I think we're going to see what you could consider full U.S. legalization here in 3 to 5 years.
You think so? 3 to 5 years.
The bullet's left the gun. You cannot turn this back, period. It's done. So how much longer are you going to drag your feet?
Well, you talked about the Cole memo, and I know you guys want to talk about social consumption. We'll get to social consumption, but this is very important, the Cole memo. I made a note of that because I don't know if all our listeners know what the Cole memo is and the consequence it has on the cannabis industry. And so why don't you explain to people what the Cole memo is?
The Cole memo was obviously it was a memo. It was basic protections, which basically had instructions that said that the
written by a man named Cole,
yes,
hence the name
yes.
C-O-L-E. Go.
The DEA and the Department of Justice cannot spend federal resources investigating or persecuting cannabis companies that are operating legally under medical cannabis laws in their given state.
And it was written in the Obama years.
Yes, and it was around for his entire administration, and then it remained at the beginning of the Trump administration, and then Jeff Sessions overturned it a couple years in, and of course you had Pete Sessions, who controls what bills hit the floor in the House of Representatives, and he refused to have anything that talked about cannabis at all hit the floor. And so with that, there was a bunch of nervousness in the market, and there was a bunch of confusion because the Farm Bill had just passed. And so you start bringing hemp and CBD into the equation, and that really confuses everybody. But now we don't have those explicit protections of the Cole memo, but they have been putting it into all these renewed spending bills. And the budget that Trump just put in, he's tried to pull it out again, pull out the protections for medical cannabis programs. Everyone seems to think that it'll remain in there once it gets through the Senate and all that.
That is a very bizarre thing you just said. That Donald Trump, who's in so many ways a very unconventional politician, would still feel compelled to link himself to these antediluvian notions that are really fading. That somehow or other this demon weed is so dangerous that we cannot even allow it to be used for medicinal purposes. So we'll take away the protections that many of these medical dispensaries have by eradicating the Cole memo. And then there's this fight that goes up. I presume when you say the they that put it into the budget, it's Democrats who put it in the budget, and then Republicans try to take it out of the budget. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. And yeah, it's somewhat insane how this keeps going back and forth. All the predictions of what would happen if you legalized marijuana, none of it's happened. I mean, we've had legal marijuana. I mean, all right, adult use marijuana hit California in 2018. I'll tell you right now, weed's been legal in California for about 20 years. Make no mistake.
Except in your case, when they put you in the...
Every now and then someone gets unlucky. That would be me. But outside of that, I tried to explain it. As I said, I think I mentioned before, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I have a bunch of friends in D.C. And I used to talk to them when I was in California running my cannabis clubs. And they couldn't understand how pervasive cannabis is in California. And I said, it's not... Although everybody in California can say, yes, I know someone who smokes weed, which I think in most states, saying that everybody can say, I know someone who smokes weed is kind of rare. But in California, it's not that. Everybody knows someone who grows weed. Make no mistake. It's that. I mean, it is literally and has been anywhere and everywhere for years. And so, and it's why you don't see these huge pops like, the California cannabis market, they're not getting as much tax revenue and all that. I mean, it's embedded in there. The illicit market isn't even considered illicit. It's day to day. I mean, people have been buying weed on the gray market for decades in California. So it's an interesting market.
All right. And so the issue of banking, this is a question I've been wrestling with for a long time. It's very complicated and convoluted, but because the feds still consider it's still illegal on the federal level, how can people get the ability to write checks? How could a medical a medical marijuana dispensary or a recreational dispensary get the ability to write checks?
So we weren't supposed to talk about this, and I literally just went through this, and it's a thing for me. So banking as a cannabis business is kind of a nightmare. My consultancy, Supercritical, we just got our bank account opened about a week and a half ago. It took us 6 weeks. We're a consultancy. We don't grow weed. We don't touch weed. We don't sell weed. We just service people who do those things. And so although we're not plant touching, we're arm's length away from the business, we're still considered a high-risk account. There's a bunch of FinCEN regulations that these banks have to go through. There's a very small handful of banks, none of the big ones really, that are willing to take on cannabis clients. The fees are astronomical. For my company, again, which doesn't touch the plant, there's not a lot of additional reporting they have to do if you were, let's say, a cultivator or something. And let's see, we paid $500 just to onboard the account. We paid $250 a month just to have the account, and that was the best deal we could find. We found $1,500 to open the account, $1,000 a month. Have to keep a $10,000 minimum if you go under a $500 fine. And this is a small startup, and you're talking about thousands of dollars of banking costs just to keep an account open. It is hyper frustrating, and you know the States Act, which is supposed to, is it States Act that pushes the banking down, or the I forget the Banking Act. It's not states. It's the other, SAFE. The SAFE. Thank you, the SAFE Act. The SAFE Act, which will allow for banking. It still doesn't address 280E taxation, which is a whole other ball of wax to deal with. But yeah, hopefully the Safe Banking Act will pass, because it's dangerous, and this kind of actually dovetails into the idea of consumption, public consumption. When you look at cannabis laws, laws around cannabis in this country are public safety laws. And when you say public safety, that is, how do we protect the children, again, from the devil's lettuce? And so in protecting children, that's why you have all these setbacks for your marijuana business has to be 1,000 feet away from a school or a daycare center, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you look at the banking laws, you know, it is wildly unsafe to force these companies to deal in cash. I mean, we did $40 million worth of sales in January. That's $40 million in cash going through 100 locations across the state of Illinois. Does that sound safe to you?
No.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you write a check. How do you pay your employees in cash?
No, you end up getting banking at these exorbitant fees, and then you can actually cut checks. But it's, like I said, it's a hassle, and it's very difficult, and it's prohibitive.
A scam.
And you still have to have armored trucks pick up the cash, because no one, even though you can find a bank that will bank you, nobody will give you merchant services. So you cannot accept credit cards. It's going to be a cash business no matter what until the Safe Banking Act passes.
All right, I'm probably going to bring you back, Sparky, to take a deeper dive, because this is a mini obsession of mine. I'm just going to make an appeal to all my libertarian friends, all my Republican friends. You say you believe in free markets. You say you don't like government regulations. You're certainly outspoken about this when it comes to rules and regulations that protect the environment from pollution. So why don't you ease up on the cannabis industry, for goodness sake, and let banks operate, let these dispensaries get access to banking without these exorbitant fees that are brought on by your intervention in the market. I just want to add that, Sparky Rose, that's me talking, not you. Don't want to get you in trouble with your libertarian friends. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about social consumption with Sparky Rose and Lisa Solomon. Right back.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
In 2010, you petitioned the USDA to keep frozen pizzas in school lunches, therefore allowing for the sauce to be counted as a vegetable in order to support the business of a Minnesota frozen foods company. Amid the obesity epidemic that has plagued this country for decades, to what extent do you believe that the financial interests of corporations in your home state should outweigh the health of America's next generation?
Okay, well, that's a big question. Thank you. First of all, I made clear in a New York Times article a few years later when I was asked about that it was just a letter that I had sent. We were in the middle of the downturn, and it was a little more, I would say, complex in terms of the language, but it's a fair criticism. And so I said I regretted sending that letter. It was about trying to keep a company afloat in a really small town that employed a bunch of people. But I think that nutrition is paramount for this country, and that's why way before I was running for president, I said that that was a mistake, all right? So let's...
I've seen a whole lot of catfish, some turtles. No gators yet, though.
Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show. Mr. Joravsky, take us home.
Man, we got a lot of conversation ahead of us. Lisa Solomon in the studio, Sparky Rose in the studio. We're talking cannabis, the insanity of the law, the federal laws against cannabis. Yeah, everybody in Illinois is partying like rock stars since January 1st when it officially became legal. And the newspapers have field days with stories about reefer, this, that, and the other thing. The reality is, folks, you still live, even if you live in the city of Chicago, even if you live in the county of Cook, even if you live in the state of Illinois, you still live in the United States of America, and it's illegal on the federal level. And I'm just going to throw this out there. All right, I'm not speaking for Lisa Solomon or Sparky Rose. I'm speaking for me. Donald John Trump and the Republicans are the ones holding up any movement towards sanity in making it legal federal. I'm just putting that out there, folks. So all my reefer-loving Republican friends out there, something to consider, all right? Before you vote for your boy again, just throwing that out there. Lisa Solomon has something she wants to say.
Yeah, just when we jump in, part of the issue with social consumption, public consumption, is if you don't allow it, you're still trying to keep it down. You're trying to make people think it's something bad, that there's something wrong with it. So to normalize, to destigmatize, to fight back against that war on drugs, you got to make it, as legal to use as alcohol. You don't drive when you're high, you don't drive when you're drunk. Mm-hmm. But Sparky has a lot to say on this, and is so knowledgeable.
Social consumption. First of all, what does it mean?
So currently, in most jurisdictions in the United States of America, cannabis consumption is relegated to your home for all intent and purpose. You cannot smoke in public. You cannot smoke in public places. Any place that has a tobacco smoking law in place for not being able to smoke indoors or within a certain feet of an establishment and all that sort of stuff, all those rules apply to cannabis smokers. And so you have a group of people who cannot use cannabis medicinally or otherwise except in the privacy of their own home. There are some basic problems with that, as in a lot of people rent an apartment. A lot of people can't smoke in their domicile, and if they do, they can get evicted. And if you're a medical patient who needs this for medical purposes, that could be a serious problem. But when we talk about public consumption, and commonly you'll hear the term consumption lounges. And there's a lot of people talking about consumption lounges here in Illinois and across the United States of America. Most jurisdictions have prevented the opening of consumption lounges. But I'll give you sort of an example that's kind of the extreme, but it really puts the point out there. And that is if you look at Las Vegas. So Las Vegas is an adult use city, an adult use state. They have a massive amount of tourism. A lot of people go there, and as soon as they get there, they go to the dispensary because they want to get some cannabis because it's legal. The hotels in Las Vegas are a little bit different than the hotels, let's say, here in Chicago, because a vast majority, if not all of them, have gaming licenses. And gaming and drugs do not mix. And so if you have drugs in a gaming establishment, the gaming establishment can lose their license. MJ BizCon, which is the largest cannabis convention that happens every year, happens in Las Vegas. I've been to countless launch parties, et cetera, in Las Vegas for cannabis companies, and the security is intense. You don't pull out a vape pen or anything because they will toss you immediately because they are not going to lose their license. So you have all these tourists rolling into Vegas. Where are they going to smoke? They can't smoke in the hotel. There's no consumption lounges. They're going to smoke on the street. And if you think about the idea that, hey, once again, cannabis laws are there to protect the public. We don't want the kids to get the cannabis. Well, then maybe you should put it behind some sort of closed door and have a place where people can go consume, where children are not allowed. It's just like a bar. You know, we have bars so people aren't walking around on the street with, you know, a brown paper bag drinking so kids don't see it. And so I'm very pro consumption lounge, and I think that consumption lounge should be made legal here in Illinois. Whether or not they dispense or not, I find to be immaterial. From a business perspective, you'd like to, but we need safe places for people to consume cannabis out of public view and away from children in a safe environment. And the biggest pushback you get is DUIs, and you know that makes sense. But we have DUIs with alcohol, and we have a lot more of them. And Colorado has a lot more alcohol DUIs than marijuana DUIs. It comes with the territory. You can't expect that, hey, we're going to allow this new intoxicant or adulterant to be legal, and that we're going to manage it to where there's 0 DUIs to ever happen. And you know, if we have an industry that pushes responsible consumption, you know, I think we can overcome a lot of those potentials for DUIs, et cetera.
All right, spell out, if you can, in Illinois, the rules regarding consumption lounges. Are they banned across the board?
They're not banned. They're not even mentioned. And as a matter of fact, there is an avenue. Basically, if the local jurisdiction, the local township or village, if they're okay with it, you can allow on-site consumption. There was a bit of legislation that leaked, right?
I thought there was one license granted down in Springfield.
Yeah, there's one that has been granted that is allowed, and then there has been at least another business. It's one of those, what do they have, like the Chardonnay where you drink wine and you paint?
Oh yeah.
Well, someone's got one of those. Yeah, I forget the term.
Smoke a joint and paint.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's paint or it's pottery, one of the two. But that just opened
Pottery
up.
would be better. Sorry.
And I know that.
The pottery. Yeah.
And I know that Looper's coming to town. Looper is a bus service out of Colorado. Mm-hmm. Where they have a bus that you can consume on the bus, and you get on and they drive basically these loops from dispensary to dispensary to dispensary.
That's coming
there
to
are
Chicago?
a bunch of bus companies that have already landed here, and they're starting to operate.
That's like, now that gets into, I went on a tangent, but in the old days, you could only have a gambling casino on a boat.
Right.
Because the notion is that you... Man, we are so weird. You just put it on a boat, it goes out to water, and it won't like pollute the environment with the gambling. Right?
And that seems to be the other thing is when you talk about consumption lounges, you're talking about public consumption lounges. Mm-hmm. Whereas, as far as I know, there is nothing that stops you from having a private club, you know, outside of the regular smoking laws. So, you know, you might have to go through, jump through some hoops to either establish yourself as a tobacco shop or something so that you can allow people to smoke on the premises. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, you know, you can open up a private club all day long. And so you know, and we're already seeing, you know, the dinners. These are not licensed establishments, but they're private dinners. You go, you pay a fee. You've opted into this event, and you're allowed to consume cannabis.
So in other words, I've been through this from the other side, but you were still in California. The state of Illinois banned cigarette smoking in public places, a whole list of places that you can't smoke cigarettes. I was a big proponent of that. I hate secondhand smoke. I've not heard the argument in the case of cannabis. Notice how I'm saying cannabis a lot, Lisa, since you've been on it. You don't like it when I say reefer. But I've not heard the argument in the case of cannabis against secondhand smoke. Is there a compelling argument against secondhand smoke for any medicinal reasons?
I wouldn't consider it compelling. That, you know, smoke is bad. Smoking is bad for you. I don't care if it's cannabis or otherwise. It's carcinogen. That's a fact. And you know, it was early on. It was one of the big sort of arguments against medical cannabis was a doctor would never prescribe a patient to smoke anything because it's terrible for you. And when you think about it, you know, medical cannabis isn't a thing. It's not a thing. It is a public policy. It is basically a state saying there is a group of people that live in our state who have it so horrifically bad that we're going to let them have this thing that might make them feel better. It's a public policy. It is not a thing. And so when you start to look at it that way, I don't think there's going to be a secondhand smoke argument because I just don't know that there's enough smoke. I mean, you can't mow through joints the way you can mow through cigarettes. I mean, I think there's just got to be a tipping point when you have enough in the air to actually affect your lungs in a bad way. I just don't know that it ever gets that bad.
You do have to be careful. You can get a contact high from secondhand smoke.
Absolutely.
If you're in a small space, if you don't know what hotboxing is, we can talk about that at a different time. But yeah, so if you're going to be drug tested, don't sit in a small enclosed space with people smoking because you'll test positive. I know someone that happened to years ago.
Yeah, no, that's why I won't let Dennis smoke in the studio.
We had to learn the hard way on that one, didn't we, Ben?
I'll get that. Yeah, well, how can I pose a question? I'll be like, hey, man. So, all right, now let's talk about walking down the street smoking marijuana law. I get a lot of people ask me. They think I'm Mr. Marijuana Law expert, Sparky. I really am not, okay? But so this is an issue in Chicago. Will the police, or in the state of Illinois, will they arrest you if you're walking down the street? Talk about public consumption, smoking a joint. What's the law on this?
Well, the law is it's wildly illegal. You can't do it. Would the police arrest you in Chicago? I seriously doubt it. They have a lot more important things. They might tell you to put it out or knock it off. I don't think you'll see an arrest, but it's illegal. You're not meant to do it. The other issue is, again, so when you look at the various consumption methods of cannabis that are available, everyone obviously is aware that smoking cannabis, it's kind of how it all started. Vaporization is a very big deal. I'm sure you've heard of vape pens, et cetera. They're far more discreet. They don't smell. You'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference between someone taking a puff off of an e-cigarette versus a cannabis vape pen. And when you bring CBD into it, that's a whole other story. But even vaping in public, although it's illegal, it's not like it's a nuisance. It's not like it happens all the time here in the city. I see it all the time. I've done it myself. It's against the law. You're not meant to consume any cannabis in public in any form or fashion.
But downtown, like West Loop, all sorts of areas, I can't go more than a block without smelling weed. People are smoking it all the time. And sometimes I walk by and there's a cop car just sitting there. Like if it's a nice fall or summer day, windows open, the smell of weed is just wafting through and they don't even turn their head. They've got other things to worry about. It's not to say you aren't going to have some that are against cannabis and are going to want to bust people. So
there's a whole nother, I don't know if you've heard this, it was in the news. I think both Texas and Ohio have this situation. So with the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized industrial hemp in the United States of America, you have a bunch of hemp farmers growing hemp for CBD. And so CBD is a cannabinoid. It's an oil that you can get out of the cannabis plant. You can get it out of marijuana or you can get it out of hemp. When you grow hemp for CBD, it has flowers just like marijuana, and I'll tell you right now, I couldn't and you couldn't and nobody could tell if I held up a bud of hemp whether that was hemp or really potent marijuana.
And even smelling it, when you smoke it smells the same, and you can get hemp pre-rolls.
Yeah, you can buy hemp that you can smoke. And so in Ohio and in Texas, they rushed their hemp legalization regulations through because you had like a 6-month window for each state to say, here's how we're going to license hemp farms. And so they all kind of rushed through some legislation. And now police departments in both of those states have said, we will not pull anybody over for anything related to weed because we can't tell the difference and we don't have the machinery to test whether or not this is less than 0.3% THC, which would make it hemp versus the illicit marijuana. And so they can't tell the difference and they don't have the machinery to tell the difference. So they're like, it's basically become legal across the U.S. because nobody can tell. It is basically legal, according to police departments. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of arrests.
I believe that Mayor Lightfoot issued some kind of memo or something to the Chicago Police Department saying do not arrest people for smoking marijuana. Because this was in Chicago. Sparky, I don't know if you followed this. I presume you have, because you seem to know everything, absolutely everything about cannabis. But this was an issue when the law was passed. As you were saying, you could smoke in your house. Well, what if you don't own a house? You're a renter. Can you smoke in your rent? And then the CHA said you can't smoke in CHA because it's federally subsidized federal housing, public housing. So if you're poor or if you're low income, where do you smoke? You can't smoke in your apartment. You can't, if you're living in the CHA, you can't smoke in the CHA. Then they said, well, you're not really allowed to smoke on your front porch. Are the police going to bust you for smoking in your front porch? Can you smoke in the backyard? I mean, you can't smoke walking down the street. You can't smoke at the Rocks, even though we've been smoking at the Rocks on the lakefront since the 70s. So, you know what I'm saying? It's
and if you stop and think about it, and I'm sure this was never intentional by anyone who put these regulations together, but again, this is an assault on Black and brown people because they can't, they don't own their home. They're renters or they're in public housing. And so once again, it's not okay for them to smoke, but it's okay for rich, affluent, white people on the north side to do whatever they want. I think the public consumption issue, you can still look at this as an assault on Black and brown people.
Yeah, that's why, by the way, and I know you don't want to go political, I'm just going to say this is me speaking. Michael Bloomberg, you got to do a lot more apologizing. That stop and frisk thing where he was talking about arresting people for marijuana, it gets them off the street. Like, there's a correlation between people having guns and smoking marijuana. That was pretty vile. So a little more apologizing, please, on that front. Yes, I would appreciate that. You've said so many things, Sparky Rose, that I want to take the deep dive in. We've run out of time. One of them was gaming and drugs do not mix. Man, we could do a whole show on gaming and drugs do not, because I know a lot of serious gamblers who love smoking reefer. And I'm not quite sure why they don't mix, but that'd probably be a whole other show, gaming and marijuana. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Sparky. You really know your stuff. Lisa Solomon comes in every other week with the cannabis conversation. Is that correct?
I could come in every day for cannabis conversations. There's so much to talk about.
So I appreciate you doing this. Lisa Solomon, Sparky Rose, Miles Kampf-Lassin did an excellent job. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend behind the boards, the man who makes it all possible, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois. And as Sparky Rose will tell you, back home in Alton, they call him White Lightning. Give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. See you tomorrow, everybody.
And Dr. Doobie. And remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this program. It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time. Once again, at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. And when you check out the Sun-Times YouTube channel, you can join the live stream chat, hang out with Pat Rod, J. Marie, Brianna, and the rest of them, like Johnny Joe and Roe. I can keep going here, but join the live stream chat. It's a fantastic time. We'll see everybody Friday.
Big problems become big problems when you let small problems sit.
That's correct.